Also, a new feature that I'm adding to my podcast is what I would call the learning guide and workbooks. I like to turn my podcasts into a master class. So there will be a downloadable learning guide and some exercises that you can do that will help reinforce the learning. And some of the things that we cover in the podcast will be covered in the guide, and also some exercises for you to actually apply the things that we're talking about. So hopefully that'll be of value as well as we move forward. Anyways, with all that, why don't we get started? Today we're going to talk about when survival mode becomes the norm and how you can recognize this and switch and get more in-depth understanding of the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, and break the cycle of living in this constant state of distress and stress that you might not even be aware of at this point. It's like the frog in the boiling water. The water gets hotter and hotter over time, and you don't really recognize the levels of stress that are continuing to build up. Or you may be very aware of, wow, we are walking on eggshells a lot. We're tiptoeing around. We are doing our best not to create chaos in our family. So that mean that we do things as parents that would be designed to keep the peace as much as possible. But then you start to wonder, am I really holding boundaries like I should? Am I pushing forward with trying to hold my son or daughter accountable or helping them learn the skills they need to learn? Or am I in a mode where I'm basically trying to keep the peace? And I'd imagine that it's some of both for most of you, but the idea being that I want you to become more aware of what your dynamics are here and work on seeing if there's things that can be done, or if you're getting caught into these automatic patterns, what can be done to do it. So basically, it's essentially moving from chaos to learning how to dial it into more confidence and calmness. And that's something that probably all of you can relate to as parents out there.
Absolutely. I mean, I get so used to, like you say, the frog in boiling water. I always say you got to get used to the dysfunction. And when you really see it is when you're out with someone else or you're in their home and you see how they handle things and you realize how totally different you do things in your own house that you've just gotten used to.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. So let's talk about some basics first, maybe the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn system. It's part of our sympathetic nervous system, part of our autonomic nervous system, the things that our brain does on autopilot to keep us alive, like regulate our blood pressure, or keep our heart rate going and breathing and things like that. These are parts of our system that is designed to keep us safe. And so the reason why this is relevant is a lot of times you might find yourself in a traumatic situation, whether your son or daughter is one who acts out and may actually tantrum to the level of destroying property or something along those lines, or they will shut down to the point of not functioning for a period of time as well. And both of those responses are very traumatic for you as a parent. So understanding how our traumatic systems work, how our bodies respond to these things, can help us gain more awareness and be able to make some changes in how we approach things that'll help us be more effective as parents, and at least stay more calm and not get triggered into these processes without our awareness being involved. So I'll try to do this as simply as possible. There's two parts of our survival mechanism and two parts of our brain that's working in tandem with one another. There's the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, when you get in that survival mode. And then the parasympathetic system is the opposite side of that, when we're feeling relaxed and calm and basically our needs are met and we're in good shape. And that's where our higher cognitive functioning can thrive. When we're in our survival mode, we lose more and more of that ability to make decisions and think through problems in creative ways. We get into a very narrow focused, get yourself to safety, deal with this particular situation immediately, because we are feeling some kind of impending threat to our safety. So when we're in that mode, we are solving problems. We're solving the problem of getting ourselves to safety or our loved ones to safety, whatever it may be. What we're not able to do is think creatively about how to solve problems or how to communicate effectively and things along those lines. As your parasympathetic system comes, your sympathetic system gets reduced, and it's kind of like they're on a sliding scale. They work with each other, and really neither one of these, they're not a bad, the survival mode is just a survival mechanism that's built in. It does us a lot of good when we're under a dangerous situation, but can work against us if we're trying to have a calm and reasoned discussion.
And I always get them confused. Sympathetic sounds like it's the good one, but it's not. Parasympathetic is the good one. I don't know how I remember. You want your parachute to open kind of thing, but my sympathetic goes off all the time when I don't need it to. And that's the issue. You
Right.
know, I used to get, because I have two neurodiverse kids, I'd frequently get calls from the school, right? Come pick up your kid, they did this, or there's a problem. So to this day, even though my kids have been out of high school for a couple of years now, every time my phone rings, I feel it. Like I feel my sympathetic nerve system kick in. There's no
Yeah,
danger there. My phone's not going to attack me, but my brain still doesn't seem to recognize that.
right. Yeah, that's a good example. And we'll get into the post-traumatic stress or the chronic traumatic stress that we've talked about, because that's definitely a manifestation of that. Yes, it's easier for me even to just talk about the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain. So the
Mm-hmm.
upstairs brain is the parasympathetic. When you're in your highest cognitive processes, your prefrontal cortex is fully operational. And the downstairs brain is when you're in that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode. I like the idea of a staircase. It's like you're going from one to the other. And so you're not 100% in your parasympathetic upstairs brain, and you're not 100% in your downstairs brain. Usually you're somewhere in between, and watching where you're at on that staircase or having the awareness of where you are in that situation can be really helpful. So maybe that's the easiest way to talk about it. We'll just use the term upstairs brain and downstairs brain and go from there. But I think we should look at what some of these things manifest as. So the downstairs brain, the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode will look like basically fighting. Obviously, that's either arguing or being explosive, or this might show up in your teen as a meltdown and anger or a shutdown. The flight is trying to avoid situations like hiding or escaping or like getting into their safe space and isolating. Freezing, that's an interesting one because it can mean just not being responsive at all. Like just their coping mechanism at that point, if they're overwhelmed, will be just to not be responsive. And that can look a lot like the shutdown or the flight as well. The one that is interesting that doesn't get talked about as much is the fawn, Fawn. So fawning. And that also could be termed as pleasing as well. The idea of it is you're agreeing with whoever the person is that you're in conflict with. You just agree to avoid conflict. You may mask how you're really feeling and tell everybody what they want to hear to keep the peace in a situation. So that's fawning. And that's one that's really not as talked about, but I do think it is really, really important. So the way this shows up in parents is kind of the same thing. The fighting, we raise our voice, we get more controlling, we double down
Yep.
on rules, we want to hold the consequences harder. That's the fight mode. Flight mode, we may just disengage and avoid the conflict entirely, or just walk away from something that we feel overwhelmed by. Freezing, it might be more like indecision. Like we just don't know what to do, so we don't say anything, we don't do anything, we just stop and watch what's happening. And then fawning in parents, this is one that I think probably needs more attention and doesn't get talked about as much. That's when you might give in or over accommodate your teen because you may abandon boundaries in order to keep the peace. And so that can become problematic if that's a primary coping mechanism that you have. And again, that is so common when you're dealing with a neurodivergent teen or young adult because of their either explosiveness or shut downiness is so extreme that fawning a lot of times is just trying to do whatever you can to, even in anticipation of a problem, make it easier or clear the pathway or over accommodate or enable essentially their behavior so you don't end up in that situation.